abundance thinking versus scarcity thinking. Now, what would that have to do with money? But be honest with yourself and ask, if I were given $250,000 today, like it just dropped in my lap, I didn't have to work for it, it just fell on my lap, what would I do with that money?
Chris Miles was able to retire twice by the time he was 39 years old. But he's not content to just enjoy his own financial freedom and peace of mind. Chris wants you to have your own ripple effect so you can live free today. He's not the financial advisor you expected. He's the anti-financial advisor you deserve. He's jumping behind the mic right now, ready to make waves. Here's Chris Miles.
Hello, my fellow Ripplers. This is Chris Miles, your cash flow expert and anti-financial advisor. The show is for you, those that work so hard for money, and you're ready for your money to start working harder for you today. Because why? You want to be work optional, where you work because you want to, not because you have to, because you have enough passive income to be able to afford the life that you love, spending the time with those that you love. And it's not just about getting rich, but it's about living a rich life. Because as you're blessed financially, you have a greater capacity to bless the lives and create a ripple effect in the lives of those around you. Thank you for tuning in, allowing me to create a ripple effect through you today. As always, if you haven't done so already, go follow us on social media. If you follow things like Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, whatever, just go to @MoneyRipples. We are anywhere you want to look, but we post a lot of different content, even like video shorts each day that you can learn from, even when I'm on other interviews that you might not miss because it's not on this channel. So be sure to check that out now. Okay, guys, so I want to go into something that I know and I've learned for myself is probably the most important thing you could be learning when it comes to wealth and when it comes to creating more money. In fact, if you understand these concepts well, I repeat, if you really understand these concepts well, the rest of the strategies become easy to adopt. They become easy to understand. And in fact, you'll start to wonder why you even believe this stuff in the first place. And I'm not talking about the 401k and poo-pooing all over that. I'm not going to poo-poo on Dave Ramsey, although he does a good job helping me do so. But no, this is going to be talking about the mindset piece that helps with the actual how-to. Because it doesn't matter if you're taught how to do something if you don't have the right principles in place to make it work. And so this is something that I learned personally. In fact, when I was breaking away from being a financial advisor, maybe you've heard the story, maybe you haven't, but after I met with my dad, I was bugged because I could not figure out how to get him to retire, even though he was debt-free and saved in his 401k for decades. And still it wasn't enough for him to live a comfortable retirement. And so a few weeks later, I'm trying to figure things out. And as I call up a friend, this is a guy that I trained to be a financial advisor. He stopped me. And he said, and maybe you guys might have heard this story before, right? He talked about the two questions. He asked me, one, how many of your clients are truly financially free where they don't worry about money, which were none of them. They were always worrying about money, even if they're retired. And then two, how many of you as financial advisors are financially free based not on the commissions you're earning, but actually doing these same investments that apparently haven't helped your clients? And of course, it was negative on both of those, right? That's what kind of woke me up. But he asked the first question before those first two. I always summarize it to those two just to keep you focused. But the very first question that my friend Doug asked me, he said, Chris, what principles do you teach your clients? When he said principles, I said, well, what do you mean? Are you talking about Rule 72, compounding interest? Are you talking about diversification? What do you mean? High risk creates high returns? He's like, no, that's not what I mean. And he never explained it. But after he got me to admit, okay, there's something wrong with financial advising, I got the book, Who Took My Money by Robert Kiyosaki that talks about why mutual funds stink. And then I also started listening to the radio show, a local AM talk radio show here in Utah that two real estate investors were putting on. And here's what's crazy, guys. I talk a lot more about strategy on this show than these guys ever did. Everybody knew they were real estate investors. They knew that they knew something that other people didn't. But unless you were paying them at least $7,500, they didn't teach you jack squat about real estate. And that's $7,500 almost 20 years ago. So with inflation, you're probably talking more like paying somebody 20 grand, right? Well, needless to say, I followed their show for months, loved it because they taught principles, real principles. What do I mean by a principle? A principle is something that never changes. It never ends. It's eternal, right? It doesn't matter if the markets are doing this or that. A principle always works. For example, how many times have you heard me talk about that dollars follow value? That's a principle I learned from those guys, right? That dollars do follow value. a lot of times, I joke about the high risk rates, high returns. Well, that's kind of one I derived from different stuff that they taught. But I realized, wait a minute, if the definition of risk is chance of loss, how would a 90% chance of loss, 90% risk equal a 90% chance of winning? Well, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't add up. And if I were to try to use what people would say is, well, you got to take high risk, get high returns, I should just go gamble and buy Powerball tickets. In fact, I should cash out all my assets right now to buy those Powerball tickets. And heck, I'll even offer you guys, you cash out everything you have too. So then we can all go in together to buy that one Powerball ticket and then we can split the shares, right? Oh, wait, by the way, this is not investment advice. I'm joking. I'm being very sarcastic, but you can't pick up on that. That's not a good strategy. That's not a way to create wealth. And so they were talking about a lot of these things. They were even talking about, even like how God is the author of prosperity. And they would talk about, things about like a lot of the founding fathers, right? They talk about the pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In fact, they even gave me like they even gave out this card with their 13 principles of prosperity. So like, they talk about faith begins with self-interest and why self-interest is actually a glorious thing in capitalism. Agency implies stewardship, which we're going to talk about today a little bit. Perspective determines action, right? Like how you see the world determines the actions you take. People are assets, things like that. Just, all that kind of stuff. Exchange creates wealth. You might have heard me use that before. The two common ones you'll hear me talk about from this card, at least, they use a lot of complex terminology in this, but it was really that dollars follow value and exchange creates wealth. You'll hear me quote them a lot. One of them actually has since passed on. The other one is now kind of down and out. You really don't hear about him publicly anymore. But in any case, those kind of things got me started on this journey. They talked a lot about scarcity versus abundance, right? Abundance thinking versus scarcity thinking. Now, what would that have to do with money? What would that have to do with the strategies we're trying to do here? Because if you just do the right strategies, does it really matter what you think about? I mean, come on. Is abundance just really thinking optimistically and that's all that's needed? That's not it, guys. There is so much more to it than that. So I want to talk about the 3 money paradigms, and I'm going to do an episode on each one. So this one's going to be one of them, but this is going to be a 3-part episode you're going to get to roll out because I really want to go deeper into this versus just skimming over and not really giving some real actual depth in this. And so here are the 3 money perspectives. It's spender, saver, and steward. In fact, let me pull up this image for you right now. Okay, so you kind of see this little bell curve, right? So I have spender on the one extreme, saver on the other, and then stewards in the middle. The curve represents wealth. Where is the wealth being held by people? It's in the stewardship place. Now, obviously, we know about spenders. They get all the bad rap anyways, right? The spenders, they, of course, they suffer. They're the ones that it's easy come, easy go. There's the savers. The savers are the ones that actually are always heralded as being the right kind of mindset. These are the people that believe they can save their way to wealth. These are the people that love their 401ks. They love to save money and they hate bills. I've heard many savers call themselves spenders because why? Because they say, well, I have to pay bills still, so I'm a spender. That does not make you a spender. The fact that you feel guilty spending makes you a saver. And notice both of these, there's not as much money. These people are always chasing something. There's always fear involved. Now, the spender, it might seem like it's abundant because they're living the life now, but they know in the back of their mind, or consciously even, a lot of them do know this, is that they can never really ever be free. They're always going to be subject to the amount of income they make to keep spending. But at the same time, the savers also are never free because they can never save up enough. They can never pay off their debt fast enough. Nothing is ever enough. This is where I've seen people like actually have mathematically enough money to retire, but they don't feel like they can yet because they feel like it's not enough. That is scarcity. This is why, even if you do a strategy, even if it works, it doesn't mean that it changes your life. Because if you're always in scarcity, you can never be free. And so I want to focus on the left hand side of this, of the spender, right? I want to focus on that right now because spenders, they really get the worst rap, don't they? They get the worst of it because they're always the ones that people will say like, oh, all the world are spenders, right? Like everybody's a spender, I will tell you this, just because somebody does have money to save does not make them a spender. I'll repeat, just because somebody doesn't have money to save does not make them a spender. There are plenty of people in America right now that if they could, they would save. If they could, they would, but they don't have the money to do so. And that's why it might look like they're spender. It might look like they're paycheck to paycheck, but in truth, they just don't have enough money coming in, enough income. Now, that could be for various reasons. And trust me, I've been in that place before, right? I remember I thought I was a spender at one point and then realized, no, no, I was just broke. And broke people, the way you could, the real true litmus test is this. Here's the question you want to ask yourself to see where you fall into the spectrum, right? And I'm going to give you the answer later in this third episode. But I'm going to give you the answer little by little here. But um, ask yourself this question and be really honest. In fact, if you have to pause this episode, do so. But be honest with yourself and ask, if I were given $250,000 today, like it just dropped in my lap, I didn't have to work for it, it just fell on my lap, what would I do with that money? If $250,000, $250,000 dropped in my lap today, what would I do with that money? How would I use it? And answer that question. Now, we know if somebody's a spender, they're going to say, I've got plans for this money. And not just plans, but I have plans to spend it and blow it. In fact, there'll be nothing to show for it later. In fact, I might even spend 280,000 out of the 250,000 potentially, right? Now, some people, it might take longer to spend it because they may not have had that big of imagination when it came to having that much money. But sometimes spenders might even try to do something responsible, like buy a house with it. They might try to buy a house all in cash and they'll say, look, I did it. But then they'll find themselves still constantly just trying to keep that lifestyle going, right? They'll try to find ways to do it. They'll probably eventually get a home equity line of credit out. Now, I know that the spenders get the bad rap, and people will say, especially the savers in the media, the scarcity ridden savers will say, everybody in the world's a spender. I'm going to argue the minority of people are spenders. Why do I say that? Because I've mentioned the stat a few times before, but of those people that are eligible for 401ks, 52% of those actually save in their 401ks. 52% of those eligible for 401ks save in a 401k. More than half will save in a 401k. Just so you know, there are people like me who's not a spender, right? I don't fall in that spender category. I don't save in a 401k, even though I'm eligible for it. Why? Because I think they suck. And I know I'm not the only one. Some of you do too, don't you? If you're a business owner, you might say, what's the sense of it? Why do I pay my own for my own stupid little match when it doesn't give me any advantage? I'm still going to pay taxes on that match later. So it did me no good, right? If you're a business owner, you realize a 401k is a dumb idea for you because it just gives you no tax advantage. You just delay your tax to a later date, hoping that the politicians won't raise taxes to pay the crappy debt and bills that they put on us. It's ridiculous to try to, defer your money to later to have zero tax advantage with those 401ks and IRAs, right? Some of you are probably like, oh crap. Actually, that's me, Chris. Thanks for putting it that way. But it's true. Like if you really think about it logically, it's kind of a dumb rigged system that they've brainwashed into believing is a good thing. But again, most people that are eligible from their 401ks will save in their 401ks. I know for a fact, and I've met with thousands of people, despite what people will tell you, and they'll try to characterize people that they really have no experience with, or very few people in their life they have experience with, where they try to lump them all in one category, and they really rip on the spenders a lot, more than they deserve. That's for sure. And what will happen is that they'll say like, oh, these people are always irresponsible. They're always blowing money, yada, 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 right? Well, there's people that spend money a lot just because they're trying to survive. Again, they're not spenders. They would be savers if they had the money there. In fact, I'll tell you in the next episode how the saver would answer this question. I'm just going to say the spender, they will answer the question where they would literally consume it. They would consume it for fun or for other things. And they could be like, hey, I'm going to give it away, right? They might just, there are some people that do it in the name of kind of being good spiritual people. They'll just give it to charity or they'll give it to, their friends or whoever. Those people, they're a different type of spender. They're more of like a money monk, so to speak, right? Where they just feel bad to have money. They think money is somehow tainted or evil and they shouldn't have it. And so they give it to other people really fast. They just get away from themselves. They repel money. I see this a lot with healers a lot of times where healers are like, oh, no, money's evil. I wish we didn't have to deal with money. Well, I'm here to tell you, money is evidence of love and service in action. Money is evidence of love and service in action. So don't repel it. But there are those people that they don't spend it the traditional consumer way that people imagine. They just give it away. They get it out of their lives because they just don't know what to do with it. They don't want to have it. And so they'll find a way to reject it or give it to somebody else. So there are those people out there. And I would put them still in the spender category, but not, again, the consumer type spender that's just blowing it on cars and, things that they normally spend on credit cards. That's not it at all. Again, the spender, the thing is, they're in scarcity. They always have to hustle. They always have to create income. When it comes to money, they also ignore what's going out. They tend to ignore what they spend. They'll pay attention to what comes in, but they'll ignore what goes out. Opposite of a saver. Savers ignore what comes in, but hyper focus on what goes out, right? So spenders tend to focus on the making of the money and then they spend it, but they don't really want to track it and do those sort of things. I'll tell you, there's different reasons. For example, a lot of times childhood trauma can cause this spending. I remember working with a client up in Idaho, and this couple, one was a saver, the wife was a spender, and when it came down to it, she was a spender because she saw that in her family, the money was easy come, easy go. And so she's like, hey, if it's going to be gone anyways, I might as well spend it on things that I want versus it going to things that I don't want. I've seen the opposite. I've seen it create savers from financial tragedies as well. I remember one person actually, her dad had gone bankrupt 3 times during her childhood. So naturally, she was a little bit stressed out when she married a business owner husband, to say the least, because her dad was a business owner and always failed. She was always worried that the shoe was going to drop and her husband was going to fail too. But again, that's trauma response. She became a saver because of trauma response. Some people become spenders because of trauma response. If this is you, focus on that trauma. It's not about getting the next latest and greatest tool to track your money. Now that could help, right? Like there are tools out there. Like I know I've talked about Mint before, but now Mint's kind of gone away. It's kind of been absorbed with Credit Karma. You've got like Monarch Money, that's one that's out there, or there's Rocket Money. That might be a little bit more. I've noticed people that are more spenders tend to like that one more. I tend to like it more. And sometimes spenders are just ADD, right? Like that sometimes they're just like they lack focus. They need colors. They need something to help them focus, and that's fine too. But Rocket Money could be a great way to do that too. But again, spenders, they really get a bad rap, but they are not the majority of the country. They are a minority. They're not as much of a minority as a steward is. I would say they're more common than that, but the vast majority are savers. And so again, if you're a spender, find out why you feel motivated, why you have to spend money. Get to that core reason, because you'll probably realize it's more of an emotional response than it is a logical one. Money can definitely be an emotional thing anyways. But remember, what's the answer to that question you had? If it was, hey, I got that money, I want to spend it. Now, I will say this: most people that are in the spender type of mindset probably won't be listening to this podcast or hardly any other money podcast, right? But that's okay. I will address this one. Now, this is one where you might be listening to a money podcast, and this is a different spin on the same spinner profile, and that's a gambler. These are the people that like to get rich quick. Like my last episode, I was talking about the get rich quick, right? And I mentioned that business is the only way to do it. Well, somebody who's in this kind of gambler mentality might think, what's that next idea? How do I get at the ground floor? See, they always think it's about timing. They always think like, yeah, you got to get in at the right time, or you got to get in before everybody else does. You got to buy that hot stock before it becomes hot, right? It's always about, you have to be in the right place at the right time with the right people, the right connections, wherever it might be, to be able to prosper. If you're in abundance, you'll realize that the right time is always now, and the right place is always right here. There's no real mystery to it. You realize that it's always the right time. There's always opportunity, an abundance of it. But when you're in scarcity and you get in this gambler mindset, this is where you tend to drop a lot of money on stuff, and you might make great money. You'll hustle and work hard and make amazing income, but then it immediately goes to something else, and then you feel like it never really comes back with the ROI that you wanted. So every once in a while, you might do it. You might be the person that got that Bitcoin at the right time, and then you're like, I did it. I'm an investor. No, you're not. You're still a gambler. You're still gambling on something that actually ignored principles of value creation, the principles that actually create real wealth, that create money in the first place. You were riding waves. So when I see people, they're gamblers. I always look for that latest, greatest hot idea or investment. They're the ones that get burned most by investments when I see them. Like they'll talk, I can't tell you how many times I've had these kind of guys come to me, sometimes the same people every time. They'll say, Chris, I just found this great opportunity. This guy does options trading for you. He'll trade your money in options and pay you 10% a month. Yeah, pretty amazing, right? Yeah, I just put 50 grand with him, and man, it's been awesome. He's been paying me every single month. And I have to tell those people every single time, like, well, get ready because it's about to get shut down. Once any securities person hears about it, they will shut it down, freeze the account, and you'll probably lose all your money. The Securities Exchange Commission, they get their money, but you don't, sadly enough. And so I was like, just be ready. If you're trying to go for that kind of get rich quick scheme, it's not going to work. So there are varying levels of spender that aren't always just the consumer spending person. It's a lot of times, again, there's that scarcity. There's never enough opportunity, never enough time. So you always got to be hustling. And that's where the gambler mentality comes out too. And like I said, there could be trauma responses from childhood that cause you to say, well, if I don't spend it now, it's going to get spent on something responsible like tires or a washer and dryer that breaks down or something like that. So I might as well spend it on something I can enjoy in life now versus just putting away for later. If you're in this place, there is hope because I'll tell you this when we get to stewardship in 2 weeks, when we get to how to be a wise steward, stewards actually recognize that you need to be part spender and part saver, at least the abundant parts of it. And so I'll describe what that means. But just so you know, the one thing I do like about spenders is that at least they're looking to use money. They're not hoarding it like a saver does. They're willing to use it. So that's good. You just need to swing to that pendulum a little bit more, right? Like I showed you earlier, swing it a little bit over to the point where you can say, oh, I need to become more like a saver, but you don't have to become the saver because the savers don't have it right either. And that's what I'm going to talk about next week because I know a lot of you listening to this show, a lot of you are savers. And this is an important episode to listen to. So I'm going to recommend you tune in next week and see this show. So check that out.